My name's Sylvana Ross. I am a graduate student in Dr. Corrie Moreau's lab at Cornell University within the Entomology department, and I study how ants are adapting to cities. Ants are absolutely amazing. They are important for all the ecosystems that they're a part of. They're ants that are important for scavenging and decomposing and taking bits of organic matter and redistributing them through the environment. They're important for seed dispersal. Some take seeds from plants and move them to other places. They're important for the food chain. They're important ecosystem engineers and important for us to indicate the health of an ecosystem. So a lot of other organisms rely on the work that ants do and the food that they might bring in and their actual colony. And so they're really important and they're really good species to study because there's so many workers that come in a colony and they're found in virtually a ton of ecosystems across the globe. And so we can study them in cities and forests and deserts and rainforests. And so you can ask a lot of really interesting questions just from ants in general. I'm studying ants within the city and how they're adapting to cities. We as humans tend to forget that nature is in the cities along with us, that we live amongst nature, not nature is separate. A lot of wildlife within cities still have to find a mate and find food and shelter and survive the winter. And the way we've built our cities and the way humans move within cities can change those behaviors. And even cooler, I think, is that it can change their DNA and the way that they're adapting to humans. And when we look at how cities are built, they have a lot of impervious surface. So that's a lot of concrete, asphalt, glass, and all of that will trap heat within the city. And we call that an urban heat island. We can look at different neighborhoods and how they are structured. Some neighborhoods have more tree cover, they have more parks and makes them a lot cooler. Some areas of the city have way more concrete, more skyscrapers, more buildings and less green space. And so they're a lot hotter. And when we look even further, especially within US cities, it's usually divided by race. And so Black neighborhoods tend to be a lot warmer, they have less green space, more CO2 emissions, and that makes their area a lot hotter. Versus more affluent white neighborhoods will have more parks, more green spaces, more trees, which makes them more cool. And so I can look at ants that live in Black neighborhoods, that live in white neighborhoods, and also live in woodland areas, and I can compare how they tolerate heat. So I picked 4 total cities: Cleveland, Atlanta, Baltimore, and Sacramento. And then I was looking at redlining maps from the 1930s. Redlining was a practice which was a way to racially discriminate people from housing. The federal government asked some surveyors to survey neighborhoods to see which neighborhoods were more of a financial risk if they were giving a home loan. And so in order to purchase a home, you need money. And so the federal government had a program where they would offer a loan and that family would pay it back. And they wanted to assess the financial risk. And so who was more likely to pay that loan back? In order to determine that, if a neighborhood had a Black family living in it, it was instantly given a hazardous grade, which meant that they were least likely to pay back their loan. And the federal government refused to give them a housing loan. They were a white neighborhood without immigrants. They were given a best, most desirable grade, and that those neighborhoods were more likely to get federal loans from the government. And what happens when you're given money and you can build equity? That means that you can send your kids off to college and you can afford transportation to a better paying job. And these maps, there are about 200 made within the US. Because we have access to them, we can see which cities were purposely racially segregated back in the 1930s, because then we can look at how those neighborhoods are structured today. The maps are pretty much the same. Neighborhoods that were secluded and considered hazardous are the same areas that are mostly Black, mostly low income, and also the hottest areas within the city. So I was able to look at the 1930s redlining maps along with temperature data. So I can actually look at satellite images and I can see which areas of the city are hotter. And then I can also overlay demographics of that city. So, the race and income of those neighborhoods. Once I got into those cities, I made sure that I was collecting ants from the different types of neighborhoods that were graded from the 1930s. And so I would go to each one of those neighborhoods. I would try and find at least 1 to 2 colonies of my study species. I make sure when I have a colony that I've collected from a city that each colony is labeled appropriately. I make sure that each colony gets a critical thermal maximum trial and a critical thermal minimum trial. That way I can compare colonies from the whole neighborhood. I can compare colonies from the entire city. And I can make sure that I'm comparing the same species so that I know that its thermal tolerances, if they're changing, it's not because they're different species and they might be serving a different ecosystem function. And that's the important part about science, is that your experiments need to be replicable. You have to take such tedious notes and make sure that every step is repeatable so someone else could, in theory, do the exact same experiment and get similar results to you. After I collect my ants and run my experiments, then it's data analysis time, and so I get to look at which neighborhoods had the highest thermal tolerances. Then I can look at which neighborhoods are more closely related to each other and how exactly they might be dispersing throughout the city. Just from right now, just from collecting the ants and running the experiments, I can already see that ants, especially within Black neighborhoods, can withstand a lot higher temperatures than, especially those in like woodland areas and more white neighborhoods that have a lot more green space, which is really cool to see right away. And so I'm really eager to then look at their DNA and their RNA and see what's actually happening on the inside. Studying ants might seem like non-important, or why ants, and especially like why in the city. And you know, science has a long history of kind of being exclusive, and now we have the opportunity to study areas that have never been touched by science before. And I think it's so important to draw these correlations between how real people are living within the city and the health impacts that they're facing, and the wildlife that is also facing the same impacts. I think it's really easy to kind of get lost in the insects and what they're doing, but just as they're dealing with high temperatures in the city and having to survive, so are the people that are living there and may not have the means and opportunities to leave those areas that we're creating and making a lot hotter. And so if we can help build a correlation between the public health necessity of keeping our cities cool and the impact that it's having on wildlife, having a change on their DNA and how they're passing on their genes and what that looks like for the future of biodiversity. We have to make science way more inclusive and include communities and other people that have a different experience with how our cities are being built, that has an implication and an impact on wildlife. And when we're affecting our wildlife to the extent that we are, that changes the biodiversity and it changes the way our ecosystems function. And we depend on our ecosystems for clean air and healthy soil for the food that we need to eat. And we depend on pollinators to make us more food. And we depend on important decomposers to get rid of dead material in our ecosystem. And when we start messing with the balance of that, it starts to impact us. And of course, communities of color and low-income communities are already facing the impact of our climate crisis. And so if we can better understand how we're changing the environment and the poor impacts that has on us, we can help people and wildlife.